So, what's trending? Bridging your Catholic faith with your everyday life. You're listening to Trending with Timmery on Relevant Radio.
Welcome to Trending. It's great to be with you. If you'd like to weigh in on the conversation, here's a little bit of what we'll be talking about. First of which, Abby Johnson, pro-life advocate, former Planned Parenthood clinic director, spoke at the Republican National Convention. And I have to tell you, each time I hear Abby speak, often there's something new that comes out about what happens in the abortion industry. And one of her comments that she made in her short 4.5-minute speech really struck home to me in one area that I hadn't really thought about before. And I've been involved in the pro-life community since I was a baby. We're also going to be talking about this in relation to National Women's Equality Day, especially as we've been celebrating this year 100 years of women's right to vote, which we've been covering quite often here on Trending, as there have been certain landmarks in the legal process of making this possible for women. And yet again, today, August 26th, is another one of those days. We'll also have a Sister of St. Paul join us today. It will be Sister Mary Lea, and she's the author of the new book, Complaints of the Saints. I don't know about you, but I think this is pretty relatable. The saints complained, they struggled in their path toward holiness, just like you and I. After all, the saints were sinners too, and so we'll be talking to her about how relatable the saints are in their own struggles. Also, I want to unpack this comprehensive sex education that has only become worse here in the state of California, across the United States, and in many other countries worldwide. In fact, lawmakers have been using the coronavirus to pass behind the scenes, when people aren't paying attention, comprehensive sex education in other states, and to force it upon other countries that don't even want it, that don't even have abortion legal in their country, such as Venezuela. So we have to understand what this curriculum is and how this has nothing to do with helping to educate children, but I think kind of falls back underneath that category of what people are talking about today of quote-unquote women's equality. Just replace that with quote-unquote children's equality, but what does that look like? What makes a child free and equal, just like we asked the question, what makes a woman free and equal to her counterpart? And finally, we're going to touch on the new HBO show Unpregnant. There's some key takeaways to understand with regard to what are reproductive rights and what are real reproductive rights for women, and how is this reproductive right slogan and quote-unquote question about access to abortion actually harming us women and our bodies. So if you'd like to weigh in on the conversation, the number is 1-888-914-9149. I would love to hear from you. You can also head over to my Instagram. We're going to be posting in just a second here a question box on my Instagram story where you can actually ask a question live during the show. If you're not really feeling the old-fashioned way of calling us and having your voice heard, it can still be heard, but I'll go ahead and read your question for you. So you can follow me at Timmery now during the show. Boy, I have to tell you, as I'm following the commentary on Abby Johnson's speech at the Republican National Convention, I see a lot of people who are saying, I'm pro-life, and they have a problem with Abby Johnson's speech. Whether you're pro-Trump, you're not pro-Trump, whatever you are, wherever you are on the spectrum of voting coming up this fall, I think that all of us can agree the fact that Abby Johnson was able to represent the pro-life community and share her testimony is pretty powerful. And I have to tell you, less than 24 hours later, the testimonies coming out from people who heard her short 4.5-minute speech are astounding. Conversions of people who are pro-abortion their whole lives, even conversions of women who have had abortions. So let's hear just a little bit of what Abby had to say during her speech. Let's start with where she talks about how this whole journey for her in working for Planned Parenthood began when she was in college.
When I was in college, Planned Parenthood approached me at a volunteer fair. They talked about helping women in crisis and their commitment to keep abortion safe, legal, and rare. I was convinced to volunteer and later offered a full-time job as a medical assistant before my promotion to director of the clinic. I truly believed I was helping women, but things drastically changed in 2009. You see, for me, abortion is real. I know what it sounds like. I know what abortion smells like. Did you know abortion even had a smell? I've been the perpetrator to these babies, to these women, and I now support President Trump because he has done more for the unborn than any other president. Life is a core tenet of who we are as Americans.
That's right. Life is a core tenet to who we are as Americans, and it's something that we have to talk about, which is why I'm grateful that this conversation is being had this week at the Republican National Convention. Again, wherever you are, wherever you stand, we have to be able to appreciate the fact that Abby was able to share her testimony. Now, here are some key things that stood out to me. I mentioned earlier on there was a moment in her speech that was eye-opening, where she talked about literally the smell of abortion. I have to tell you, I've been in front of the abortion clinics. I've had the abortionists and the nurses angry that pro-life advocates were outside talking to women and helping them to leave the abortion clinic. So angry, in fact, that they've brought out on petri dishes the remains of babies who have been pulled apart. This is something I've seen firsthand. But it's not something I've seen inside a closed building with limited air, and with body after body being piled up before it's then put into a refrigerator. Why? To reduce the smell of what abortion is. You see, we often think of abortion as some simple, sterile procedure. Sure, in the best case scenario, perhaps the procedure itself is sterile. But abortion is raw. It's gruesome. It smells like death, because it is death. I'll never forget when I was watching the videos of David Daleiden, who went in undercover in the abortion industry. He speaks of how at one point he's there side by side with a procurement technician, and she's pulling apart the various pieces of the babies. And she goes, "Oh, there's a leg. Oh, this one was a twin." And then next thing you know, she says, "Yeah, it looks like a war-torn zone. It looks like a war field." This is what abortion is, and she spoke to that truth there at the Republican National Convention. Now, something that stands out as well about her speech that Abby so often shares in her own testimony is when she says, "I really believed I was helping women." How often do we believe when we're doing something not right that we're doing the right thing? We talk ourselves into it. We push ourselves to believe that this is what's right. This is what's really helping people. But I have to tell you, as we're looking at Women's Equality Day today, and many people are talking about inequality and how equality has to start today, I think it's pretty important that we remember there will be no equality for women while abortion is legal. Women continue to be manipulated to believe that contraception and abortion are necessary to live, have a career, work, and even if you want to have a family, that you need abortion and contraception in order to do so. It's time we told women the truth. Go look at my tweets on social media today. I've been posting links to some of my incredible guests and conversations we've had on Trending, and I will continue to do so throughout the day, where we can change the narrative of quote-unquote Women's Equality Day to have a real conversation about how women have been lied to and manipulated. And we're going to talk a little later on about this whole language of reproductive health or access to abortion, because women's bodies are struggling. We've seen an increase in health spendings for women's fertility and overall health issues. And this relates back to the abortion issue and the confusion we have about reproductive rights and basic health care for women. And so we'll unpack this more as the day goes on, but I want to share with you, before we change topics here, one tweet that really stood out to me. The woman's name is Nora, and she posted this in response to Abby Johnson's testimony that she heard yesterday. Nora says this: "I was pro-choice my whole life. I had an abortion. I couldn't understand pro-life, and it never made sense until hearing your speech tonight." You see, she goes on to say this. Listen to this. "I felt the passion behind pro-life activists. You have changed my heart and changed my mind. Thank you." Wow, that's an incredible testimony. In 4.5 short minutes of hearing the truth of what abortion is, the smell, the look, the environment, the feel of what abortion is. The fact that many women do get involved in the pro-abortion movement thinking that they're helping women, but that's not the case. And here's a testimony of yet another woman who was fed the lie that in order to be equal, we have to have an abortion. We have to have access to an abortion and contraception. And yet, in the face of her own choices that she has made, she's willing to hear the testimony of another woman who's saying, there's another option. This isn't right for us and our bodies. And so praise God that this testimony is being shared publicly. I encourage you, no matter where you land on the political spectrum, share the testimony of Abby Johnson, because it's something for all of us to think about. And even if you say, hey, I do or don't support the Republican Party or President Trump or possible President Joe Biden, you can still share the story that is shared in this brief clip, which I've gone ahead and posted on my Twitter. I'm really excited to have this conversation today with my guest, Sister Mary Lea. If you're just joining us, you're listening to Trending with Timmery. Sister Mary Lea recently wrote the book Complaints of the Saints, and she's here with us today to unpack this book, to point out how accessible and how really the saints have this accessibility and humanity to them that will help us along our own spiritual journey. Sister Lea, thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you for the invitation.
It's great to be with you. I want to hear a little bit as to what inspired you to write the new book, Complaints of the Saints.
Well, to tell you the truth, I'm an inveterate complainer. and so I had to figure out how I'm going to become a saint. But also, complaints are such a common human way of dealing with things. It's very natural. And so I figured almost everybody must complain to some degree.
It sounds like you wrote this book for yourself and your own discovery of how can I relate my complaining to my walk of holiness, especially as a sister of St. Paul. Share with us a little bit about your own vocation and how complaining has perhaps been a battle for you toward holiness.
Well, I probably would have been a very, even a better complainer had I not entered the convent. It's it's part of my character. And so as you saw, my Twitter handle is Crabby Mystic, and that kind of explains where I am. I'm crabby by nature, but we're supposed to try to find God, get closer to God, be open to God, and that's what a mystic really is. So I kind of find myself between nature and grace, and so it was a perfect thing to use as a vehicle. And I figured if I have this problem, I should see if some of the saints had it too. And sure enough, it's rather a common problem even for the saints. Of course, they dealt with it better than we do.
I'm thinking of the battle of the letters between St. Augustine and St. Jerome. I don't know that they ever actually met in person, but both early church fathers, both incredibly influential in our faith, yet St. Jerome could not stand St. Augustine. If you read the letters back and forth, it's hilarious how like snotty and prideful he is. And it's such a reminder of how relatable the saints are. And you mentioned, we all have our own disposition. And you mentioned, you're a little bit of a complainer. And you have this, crabby mystic Twitter handle. How have the saints stood out in their own stories for you and your journey?
Well, looking for saint examples for the book, I found, well, of course, we're daughters of St. Paul, so Paul did his own share of complaining. But there are people like St. Damien of Molokai, who had plenty of things to complain about, and he did. St. Jerome, of course. And I find St. Therese an interesting specimen, because she tells us when she wanted to complain and didn't, because she figured out how to overcome the inclination. But she's very clear that she had the inclination. So she's a great example for people. Even like Teresa of Avila, too, who tells us complaint can be part of your prayer. It should be. So there's all kinds of examples, great ones.
Can you tell us any particular stories of, for example, St. Therese, who is so beloved by many?
Yeah, she. Well, there's a famous one of her in the laundry. When she's doing. There's actually a photograph of her doing laundry with a group of sisters, and she says, "Let me just see if I have it here. Let's see. She was there washing, and her companion, her close companion, was very rambunctious, I guess, very exuberant in washing, and she was splashing the dirty water all over Therese. And she said, I was going to stand up, probably because they weren't speaking, it's a cloister. I was going to stand up and make it very obvious that she should be a little more careful of what she's doing. But then I realized this is a perfect opportunity to gain grace. So I didn't. I just took it, and I realized after the half hour of time we were washing that it became rather pleasurable. It was a great opportunity to show God my love for Him and to accept this, little dance.
I'm just imagining St. Therese.
She did.
I'm just imagining St. Therese as she's sitting there, and on a very maybe like unholy holy moment, like, I can't stand her, but I love you, Lord, I can't stand her. And you almost start to like amuse yourself because this person's annoying you so much, but it is an opportunity to actually be united to Him in prayer. And it's so funny because it's so simple. She's splashing, she's making a mess as she's doing laundry, and I can relate to that. Especially within marriage, when you have criticisms about how your spouse does the dishes, or they against you about how you do the dishes, and it often has to do with stacking, water, drying, how many dishes are in the sink or how many aren't. And it's the same sort of thing that we hear of, and it's easy to criticize, which is a form of complaining. Yet instead it's an opportunity as well to bite our tongue, walk away, maybe do more dishes so that we don't complain so much to the other person about how they themselves do the dishes. So, Sister Mary Lea, share with us maybe that key story that really inspired you to ultimately write this book titled Complaint of the Saints.
A particular story? Well, there's a lot. Well, actually, there's one that I love very much. I call her a contemporary complainer. She's not a saint officially by the church, and I don't know if she ever will be. But remember the 4 women, the 3 religious and the laywoman, who were martyred in 1980 in El Salvador? Well, the laywoman, Jean Donovan, she had been a very well-educated young girl, probably coming from a good family. She had a great job in the banking world, but she felt this need to go to the missions for some reason. And so she joined the Mary Knoll missions instructional group that they had, and then went down with some people from the Diocese of Cleveland and ended up right in the middle of the the Civil War that was going on. And right soon afterwards, she wrote back to some friends, and this is what she said: "I keep getting very frustrated and wonder what I'm doing here as opposed to being married and living at acres. Sometimes I think, oh my God, I'm 26 years old, I should be married. I shouldn't be running around the way I am." And then I sit there and I talk to the Lord and I say, "Why are you doing this to me? Why can't I just be your little suburban housewife?" And you know, God hasn't answered me yet. I don't. Sometimes I get mad at God. Sometimes I tell God I'm going to chuck the whole thing. I've had it. But then she said, in the end, there's lots of times when I feel like coming home, but I really do feel strongly that God has sent me here and wants me to be here, and I'm going to try to do my best to live up to that. So there's somebody who really complained to God. It didn't make sense to her what she was doing, but she felt she had to do it. And we, in our own little ways, feel that way very often too. You know, why? Right. In my case, why is a superior asking me to do that? You know, I have my talents are somewhere else. But you know, that's not the case, and I'm sure it happens in married life too. You know, you have to do something, and you don't really want to do it, but and you can complain to God.
It's a good reminder.
Even to your spouse,
right?
Or to
You
superior.
Right, you mentioned how you might have particular talents in an area you don't understand. Why aren't I being used? I have these gifts, I have these capabilities, or maybe you feel like you don't have any gifts to offer. And you're going, Lord, like, okay, like, why didn't you give me anything? And for some reason, we're missing it. You know, either way, we kind of see like we're complaining because we have something to offer and it's not being utilized, or we're complaining because we have nothing to offer. We think we have nothing to offer. And so we're not being used to our fullest potential. It's a really good reminder that, you know, boy, is it easy for us to not want to accept our state in life. Yet here's a story of a martyr, a woman who died, who accepted her state in life despite kind of making it clear, this isn't what I wanted. I wanted to be married and have a family.
Yeah, she even had a suitor. You know, they didn't ever get engaged, I don't think, but she'd left him behind, you know, to go to the mission. On what she thought was probably going to be a temporary gift to.
You know, I keep thinking, sister, about how so many people, and if you're just joining us, you're listening to Trending with Timmery. That is Sister Mary Lea of the Daughters of St. Paul. She wrote the recent book, Complaints of the Saints. And I relate this to the struggle that many young people face today of being in those single years. They wish they were married. They wish they were dating. They wish they had a child. Or even the career struggles that so many of us face. You know, I wish I was doing this with my life. I don't have job satisfaction. I wish I was more active. I wish I was more utilized. Yeah, sometimes we're missing within the spiritual journey that this cross, this experience, these circumstances are actually an opportunity for us to be united to our Lord and accept what He's put before us, and to learn to appreciate, you know, the career. It's a matter of survival. And the people around us are a way that we can contribute to the day-to-day, and how complaining can get in the way of finding meaning and purpose wherever we're at.
And we have to learn how to turn our complaints into prayer. That's the best way to deal with them. Because depending on our personality, our temperament, you know, we're just going to die complaining as they close the cover on the coffin. You know, it's something you can't get rid of. But the thing is to turn it into prayer, into conversation with God, will make it so much more meritorious. And we find our holiness through those defects.
Yes. How do you turn your complaints into prayer, though?
Well, talk to God about them. That's what Teresa Avila said. You know, she said, if something's bothering you, you're supposed to talk to God like you talk to anyone else, she said. So, you know, if you were going to complain to God. He's really the only one who can do anything about it anyways. And He likes to hear us.
Right. And you may be listening and thinking, wow, is it that simple? How do we transform our complaints, our frustrations? by turning to our Lord and sharing with Him what we ourselves are going through and asking Him to sanctify it. And perhaps, like St. Therese, we can reach down and pick up that piece of trash that our fellow sister dropped on the floor that annoys us. So go check out the book. You can order it today, Complaints of the Saints by Sister Mary Lea. Thanks for being with us, sister. We'll be right back here on Trending with Timmery.
Catholic professionals find purpose and take your career to the next level by experiencing Tepeyac Leadership Initiative. TLI is a 5-month experience, which you can access from anywhere in the U.S. Visit tliprogram.org to learn more. Turn your Catholic faith into the driving force in your career through professional development and spiritual growth. Go to tliprogram.org now. Be part of the next generation of Tepeyac leaders. tliprogram.org.
So, what's trending? Bridging your Catholic faith with your everyday life. You're listening to Trending with Timmery on Relevant Radio and the Relevant Radio app.
What exactly are reproductive rights, and how can we reshape the conversation when friends talk about access to abortion and reproductive rights, especially in light of today's hashtag Women's Equality Day, as we recognize 100 years of voting for women here in the United States over the last couple of months. Now, if you're just joining us, you can go ahead and give us a call. The number's 1-888-914-9149. Or you can go ahead and head over to my Instagram story at Timmery, that's Timmerie, where you can type into the question box and leave your question during the show. We'd be happy to take your question or perhaps a short story that you're sharing. I have a caller wanting to comment on our next topic having to do with comprehensive sex education, things you should know as a parent, but also even if you're not a parent, how has the LGBTQ ideology really entered into comprehensive sex education, and how has that influenced what kids have access to? Duncan's calling, and he'd like to share a little bit about sex education himself here in the States. Welcome to the show, Duncan.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I've been made aware of a program that I wanted to share with the listeners in Timmery. It's an organization called RUA Woods, which is RUAH, and it's outside of Cincinnati, Ohio. And they've taken Pope John Paul II's teaching on the theology of the body, and they've broken it down starting in kindergarten for age-appropriate materials all the way through the 12th grade. And they've had writers from the St. John Paul II Institute in Washington help write the stories and craft the materials for the young people. So it's a proactive way for parents to start teaching their children when they're in kindergarten. And it's not about sex, but it starts out about God has made each one with a purpose and it being a unique gift to their brothers and sisters in humanity. And it starts at that level and just grows as the child grows through their years until they're an adult. So what I try to explain it like, it's like an inoculation against our culture of sex by using the great teaching that John Paul II gave us.
You're listening to Trending with Timmery. It is great to hear that there are resources out there available to handle kind of how to help parents in being the primary educators of their children. And I appreciate that this curriculum is not overly sexualized, as will be a stark contrast to what we're going to go through in the comprehensive sex education that is already implemented in 29 of our states here in the United States. But if you'd like information about Rua Woods, we're going to go ahead and post a link to that on social media now as a possible option for you, especially with many people homeschooling, doing charter schooling, or schooling from home. This is an opportunity for you to take things into your own hands and be equipped with resources to educate your own family rather than letting the school systems take that from you. So I've been following over the last couple of years comprehensive sex education as implemented very radically here in California. And as the saying goes, what happens in California, there goes the rest of the nation. And I have to tell you, it's been very true with regard to comprehensive sex education. Now, you should know that there are some key organizations involved in crafting the comprehensive sex education, specifically organizations related to the World Health Organization, Planned Parenthood, the CDC, and UNESCO, which has to do with sex education coming from the United Nations. Now, you should know that there's a curriculum that's being pushed from the United Nations and from the World Health Organization that was written in collaboration with Planned Parenthood for your kids. And this is the curriculum available in the majority of schools. Now, implemented to even more intense degrees in certain areas than others, but it's something that you should be aware of. And I'm going to unpack some of the curriculum because here's the deal. Most of the curriculum is meant to begin at age 4. Age 4. This is a wake-up call. If you have kids, if you don't have kids, this is something that you should care about. This is something that more people should be speaking out against in our culture because it has to do with Women's Equality Day. It has to do with gender ideology. You see, I was talking to a pro-life and family leader in the United States just the other day. She's from Ecuador, and she was talking about how this is something that has been used to really be pushed forward here and there in Venezuela because of COVID. COVID-19, what's happening is lawmakers worldwide are masking the comprehensive sex education. And by the way, if you have children, this is a little ears warning. You might want to be careful who you have in the car. You can always listen to the podcast later, parents. And I do ask you to do so because I know not all of our content is always kid-friendly. If you ever want to hear a topic and save it for later, share it with a friend, just head over to relevantradio.com/trending where you can subscribe to your favorite podcasts. That's, of course, trending on your favorite apps. Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, you name it, we're there. But here's the deal. When I was talking to my friend from Ecuador, she was sharing that 3 rounds now over the last few months of COVID, multiple laws have been implemented and curriculums having to do with comprehensive sex education, abortion, and contraception access. And they're doing it under the veil of COVID-19. Or, as others have pointed out, they're doing it under the veil of LGBTQ rights and LGBTQ education. And here's the thing. You have to understand, lawmakers are terrified to say no to anything related to the LGBTQ movement and ideology. And so often, these things end up going past unquestioned or even fully researched, yet at the same time tacked onto it is comprehensive sex education. So here's a little bit of what you should know. And again, little ears warning, if you're just joining us now, this is definitely a podcast to listen to later on your favorite podcasting app. But in the state of California, we have comprehensive sex education for as young as kindergartners, for 5-year-olds. Now, 28 other states also have some forms of this comprehensive sex education, but California and Washington State are some of the worst. In fact, Washington State signed into law this very curriculum during COVID-19, when people weren't paying attention, when many people weren't present to vote and to communicate, collaborate, and debate on whether or not this is something good and healthy for children. It was passed and signed into law without any questions even being asked. And in fact, if you're in the state of California, please know that you are fighting this in September. And you can speak up and do something now so that this curriculum is not brought to your children. And I'll share a little story with you actually having to do with Texas and the existing sex education that has influenced many for a number of years now. I'll share that with you in just a little bit. But here's what you should know. So in the education, it emphasizes in the curriculum a kind of push from UNESCO and Planned Parenthood and the WHO, they talk about how children should be able to form, quote, sexual relationships with partners. Did you hear that? Children should be able to form sexual relationships with partners. We're not even talking about teenagers. We're not even talking about young adults. They're making it very clear that this has to do with sex for children. I'll go on. From the curriculum, it says that children should have agency in their own sexual practices and relationships. I'm sorry, what? Children shouldn't have any sexual practices or relationships having to do with sex at all, right? So why is UNESCO, that's coming from the United Nations, Planned Parenthood, and the World Health Organization, able to pass these laws into various states? In fact, they're even encouraging in some areas that, well, you know, the Catholic Church would disagree with some of what we're saying. However, go talk to a Catholic priest who may or may not disagree on masturbation. In fact, many priests are okay with masturbation. This is actually a part of the curriculum. Pretty scary to know that there's this attitude that some of our own Catholic priests tend to downgrade sexual morality or to talk to children about sexual morality that realistically the parents should be speaking to them about, even within the confessional. Your job is not to approve masturbation for a child. That should be a big warning sign for you to encourage the child to go and speak to his or her own parent. So here's what else is in it. We see that there are multiple book titles such as What's Happening to My Body, one for boys, one for girls. There's another book titled Changing You, A Guide to Sexuality. Guess what age range that's for? Kindergartners through third graders. Did you hear the title of that book for kindergartners through third graders? Changing You, A Guide to Sexuality. There's another book, Sex, Puberty, and Stuff. Another titled Healthy Gender Development, and then another book that's quite frightening that's also for kids under the age of 10, titled It's Perfectly Normal, and it has illustrated pornography in it for children, teaching them about sexuality and various things that could or couldn't be done if they felt so comfortable. Because of course, everything's okay because comprehensive sex education does talk about consent with 10-year-olds. I'm sorry, but I don't even think 10-year-olds fully understand what consent means, nor do they understand what they're consenting to with regard to sexuality. And in fact, by teaching young children about sexuality in such a way, you're actually causing them to be curious and put at great risk them going home and Googling things or trying things out on their friends. And I'm sorry, I know that's blunt, but this is the truth of the matter when comprehensive sex education is implemented in numerous states. And I have to tell you, I'm tired of hearing from my own peers who were sexually abused because they were overly exposed to sexual practices at a very, very young age. And one of the ways this is done is through television, unsupervised media attention, and also through comprehensive sex education. It doesn't just happen by language they hear on the streets from their friends. That's part of it and holds a huge influence, but it's already being taught to them through media, stories, and their own schools. Now, for kids under the age of 10 and even as young as 4, they're encouraged to engage in self-touching, and in fact, there's a testimony within some of the comprehensive sex education curriculum that's being used about what happens and what the sensations are when you touch yourself. And guess what? At the end of it, it's signed Will, age 46. Why on earth would they be sharing the story of a 46-year-old man's experiences with a child as young as 4 or up to the age of 10? It doesn't make any sense. Not only that, they're teaching that sexuality is fluid by giving kids what are called genderbread men, where they can draw on them and even change out their sexual organs on any given day, showing that sexuality is fluid or even that it's changeable, which isn't even correct science, health, or education. So why is this curriculum a part of the day-to-day? I've warned you, this isn't necessarily the best topic for kids to be around as we're discussing it, but the reason why I wanted to share it with you is because you as parents, and you don't even have to be a parent, I've been involved in sharing my thoughts on the problems of comprehensive sex education, on sharing why it's harmful for children, how it feeds the abortion lobby and the abortion movement. And I haven't had to have children in order to speak up for the innocence of kids. You see, this is about keeping young minds and bodies both safe and innocent. So here's what you can do as a parent, or not as a parent, just as a concerned citizen. Number 1, go to the local board of education and find out what curriculum is implemented in your state, and even ask for copies of what's in that curriculum. Number 2, visit comprehensivesexualityeducation.org. I'll go ahead and post a link to that on my social media now. You can find me at Timmerie, that's Timmerie, because it will give you some guidelines for understanding how important it is that we speak up and ways for you to get involved. Remember, lawmakers are terrified because this often relates to the LGBTQ issue, and so this curriculum is being passed unsupervised. Now, you can be the whistleblower by going and getting the information from your local board of education and sharing the curriculum publicly. Take links, copy and paste photos, and share them to social media. A lot of people, a lot of parents who might even disagree with you in the long term about sexuality overall, often will agree with you that young kids shouldn't be sexualized. So as we're talking about this, I want to share a brief story of how I've seen when we continue to keep strong education, abstinence-only education programs implemented, the influence it can have. I'll never forget when I was in college, I was doing an interview, I think it was with like CNN or ABC News. And they were meeting me across the street from my dorm room in, a public area. And there was a question of a law that was being passed having something to do with either condoms or contraception for teenagers. I don't remember what it was. But here I was, ready with my couple of talking points, knowing that, well, this is very secular media. They're probably going to manipulate anything I say. So I'll make really short statements. Hopefully it won't be too cuttable and they have to air what I actually say, if they air what I say at all. Well, it was fascinating because as the interview was going on, it was a very young woman in her early 20s who was interviewing me for the news network. And she let me speak. And she was complimentary and asked questions that I was shocked by. After the interview was over, she said, you made me think about my own upbringing. I'm from Texas, and in Texas, they have abstinence-only education. And I believe in waiting till marriage. Even though that's not normal, I was taught that in my public school. And it's something I understand is very important. So although public schools, or schools in general, shouldn't be the first place people are learning about abstinence and chastity, it does make a difference. And it was one reporter working for a secular news network who was willing to allow a conversation to be had about sexuality in the state of California because of her education that she received in Texas. So if you're in the state of Texas or know anyone who is, you are getting ready to fight comprehensive sex education with a vote coming up in September. So dig in, don't wait. It's time to speak up and protect young hearts, minds, and bodies. We'll be right back here on Trending with Timmerie.
Timmerie will be right back. You can reach her on Instagram and Twitter at Timmerie. That's Timmerie.
The beginning of school, beginning of religious ed, we think of all of our precious young people.
I'm 8 years old.
And how dear they are to God.
Yes.
7 things every kid needs to hear. I love you. I'm proud of you. I'm sorry. I forgive you. I'm listening. Communism has failed every time it was tried. And number 7, you've got what it takes.
What a responsibility it is to help them to discover the Lord and know God's love for them.
Make Relevant Radio part of your back-to-school routine. We're on your car radio, your tablet, and your phone.
The U.S. Catholic bishops have stated,
the threat of abortion remains our preeminent priority because it directly attacks life itself.
Because it takes place within the sanctuary of the family.
Because of the number of lives it destroys.
Let's continue to ask Our Lady's intercession.
And pray for an end to abortion in our country.
And the protection of human life from the moment of conception to natural death.
Hi, this is Bishop David Ricken of the Diocese of Green Bay. Let us pray. Remember, O most gracious Virgin Mary, that never was it known that anyone who fled to thy protection, implored thy help, or sought thy intercession was left unaided. Inspired by this confidence, I fly into thee, O Virgin of Virgins, my Mother, To thee I come, before thee I stand, sinful and sorrowful. O Mother of the Word incarnate, despise not my petitions, but in thy mercy hear and answer me. Amen.
Add your memorares to the tally at relevantradio.com/mom. It's important that all your hard work and assets benefit your loved ones now. Why not be sure they benefit after your earthly life as well?
August is National Make a Will Month.
We recently partnered with Free Will to provide you with an easy and intuitive online service to create your will at absolutely no cost.
There's even an opportunity to add Relevant Radio as a beneficiary to your will. We'd be most grateful if you did, but you're under no obligation and you'll still benefit from the free service.
relevantradio.com/freewill.
Morning Air.
Father Looney, good morning. Welcome back.
Always a great joy to be with your listeners of Morning Air.
Harry Kramer.
Oh, I'll tell you, you folks ask just fantastic questions.
Don is in Richfield, Wisconsin. Don, good morning. Welcome to Morning Air.
Good morning. And first I wanted to say thank you for what you do. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. You're welcome. You're welcome. It's a family, both ends of the radio. We help each other on the path to heaven.
Morning Air, 6 a.m. Eastern, 3 a.m. Pacific on Relevant Radio.
We're talking about what you're thinking about. You're listening to Trending with Timmery on Relevant Radio and the Relevant Radio app.
You know, I mentioned Texas and how parents need to lean in and get ready for the fight against comprehensive sex education because it's already come to your state and the vote is next month. So get involved, speak up. You can make a difference for young hearts, minds, and the safety of their bodies. But also, news coming from Texas. Our thoughts and prayers are with all of those in Texas and Louisiana and anyone in the path of Hurricane Laura this evening. Relevant Radio will keep you up to date on news about this hurricane in our hourly newscasts throughout the week. And please be sure to join us for the Family Rosary Across America tonight at 7 p.m. Central as we offer up our intentions for the safety and protection of all in danger of Hurricane Laura. I also want to let you know if you are a listener of Relevant Radio, listening now, maybe even for the first time, welcome. August is National Make a Will Month, and Relevant Radio has recently partnered with Free Will to provide you with an easy online service to create your own will at absolutely no cost. You see, Jesus often preached about being good stewards of the gifts that we're given. A legal will guarantees that the important people in our lives and everything we've worked for and believe in will be taken care of according to our wishes and our Catholic faith. Having a will in place also gives you the peace of mind knowing everything is prepared and organized. There's even an opportunity to add Relevant Radio as a beneficiary to your will. We will be most grateful if you did, but you are under no obligation and you will still benefit from this free service. Just head over to relevantradio.com/freewill and start your free will today. There's no catch. It's really completely free to you. relevantradio.com/freewill. As we wrap up today's show, I want to briefly bring to your mind, in kind of keeping in mind the Women's Equality Day, a show that's come up on HBO. It's actually a movie, and it will be aired middle of September, and it's called Unpregnant. Now, it kind of gives this comedic type of feel about an abortion drama, and it shows essentially a few things that are pretty key. It makes clear that it's not fair that a teenager who finds herself pregnant has to get parental notification to have an abortion. It shows that, in fact, because a young woman is being denied access to an abortion for her body without other people having a say, that a woman has to go through the burden of traveling to a different state. And this young girl must come from a Catholic family because in the preview itself, there's an image of Pope Francis up on the mantle as the conversation shows that this young girl is not going to tell her parents about the pregnancy, that is the baby, or about her choice to have an abortion. So she goes and contacts her friend, former best friend, and asks her for help. And together they take a road trip over 1,000 miles to New Mexico where she can get an abortion on her own terms. This movie tells a lie that women do not have equality because they do not have access to so-called reproductive rights. It's important to remember that, because as people are championing women's equality today, as we celebrate 100 years of the right to vote for women in the United States, so often people are led to believe that unless I have access to abortion, unless I have reproductive rights, I am not equal. And I have to tell you, I'm sick of women being treated unfairly because of an agenda that actually isn't equal in and of itself. There will be no equality for women as long as abortion stands, because they're being told the lie that it's necessary to live, to work, to have a career, and even that abortion and contraception is necessary in order to have a family on your own terms. That's not true. There are many highly educated women who have had families and who have even worked who didn't need contraception or abortion in order to make them equal in those fields. So how about we tell the truth and are honest to women and their bodies, and even talk about how reproductive health should actually have to do with proper health care for women. I think that this is really important because many people today are struggling with infertility. Many people today are struggling with underlying health causes that are impacting their overall health. And because of so-called abortion access and false reproductive rights, they're having the story of contraception written on their bodies rather than getting true treatment to figure out what is really going on with their bodies to bring health and the future possibility of having children down the road. And it's also not true. A woman can't just become unpregnant because she's not a man. Yet our culture tries to act as if this is possible. So let's love women and their bodies. Let's tell the truth about fertility and about what real reproductive health should be, treating real underlying health issues and helping women who are struggling with fertility. We'll be back tomorrow on Trending with Timmerie with Christina Pineda, our in-house matchmaker from Matchmakers in the City.